Today I have the pleasure of introducing Wesley Faulkner, a tenured speaker who is graciously accepted to speak at 990 on the topic of neurodiversity. Wesley is a first-generation American, public speaker, and a podcaster. He's a founding member of the government conspiracy group Open Austin and a staunch supporter of racial justice, workplace equity, and neurodiversity. His professional experiences spans technology from AMD, Atlassian, Dell, IBM, and MongoDB. Wesley co-hosts the developer relations-focused podcast Community Pulse and serves on the board of South by Southwest. It's a pleasure to have Wesley with us today. Come on stage.
Hello, everyone. This is an interactive session, so I'm going to need some participation. If I don't get participation, and especially if you look around, there's not a lot of people in the room. It's going to be very, very awkward for me. So if you could, when I ask a question in the call and response, just say me, okay? And so we're going to do a practice, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, all right, good, good. All right, we'll have opportunities to get that like a little bit amped up, but let's go ahead and get started. First, let's go ahead and just do a trial run with a question. How many people have heard and know what neurodiversity is? Yay! Okay, this works. Okay, great. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about me. All right. My name is Wesley Faulkner. As mentioned before, I'm a first-generation American. The reason why I put that in my bio, people wonder how that's related, because it really shaped who I am, because it highlights the bias we have when we see someone, when we meet them. And one of the things that you may not notice when you see me is that I'm not visibly disabled or have a disability. And these biases kind of like permeate society in different ways that we interact. And when I grew up in the United States from parents who were not American, there were several cultural disconnects that I didn't know about because my parents didn't grow up the same way that other people grew up. And so they didn't get passed down to me. And it was through this experience that I learned that being different doesn't mean that you're just different. It means that you're weird. It means that you're actually not conforming. And conforming is odd. Conforming is confusing. Conforming if you're not conforming, it's confusing. And if you're not conforming, that's considered bad. So those are the things that I learned, and it taught me to suppress things that would make me stand out. It made me try to figure out the world around me and try to emulate that as much as I can. And that's kind of what I was taught from all of the social reinforcement, especially if you're a kid. If you're a kid growing up and you don't have the same shoes that someone else does, you don't know the same cartoon characters or superheroes that everyone else does, then you're seen as a person just is an alien on the same on a planet where the natives really cannot understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. And that's kind of how I felt. And so I'm dyslexic and I also have ADHD. And in that combination, that also made school hard as it is. Think about sitting still, can't pay attention, but at the same time have a hard time reading and being able to absorb information the way other people do. That was kind of my life, and I just felt really out of place no matter where I was. So what I did is, when I finally got into college, I was dating someone whose their mother was an ESL teacher, so they understood specific needs, and that's when I actually got tested, and that's when I actually got a formal diagnosis of ADHD and dyslexia. And then what I took from that information is that this is another piece or another slice of evidence that I should be ashamed of. And so don't tell anyone, don't share it with anyone, hide it away. And that stayed the case until around 2020, when I don't know, something happened that made me spend more time with myself. And I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like where I felt that there was not a place for me, that I didn't fit in, not only in the world, but in a place where, you know, I also got laid off. And so I felt that I can't provide for myself. I can't provide for my family. There's no one that's, I mean, particularly Black people didn't feel like they were in at the time. So it felt like a really hostile place to be. And so I just wanted to try to figure myself out and figure that out and get to a place where I can feel like I could be me. So let's take a quiz so that this is a demonstration to try to put you in my shoes. And I'm going to ask some questions, and then I'm going to present some answers. When I ask you for your answer, just say, great, awesome. All right, everyone ready? These are really easy, okay? So don't stress, you didn't have to study. That's why it's a pop quiz. All right, first question. A bat and the ball together costs $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Okay, if the answer is 10 cents, say me. If the answer is 5 cents, say me. Okay. The answer is 5 cents. The reason for that is because 5 cents plus $1.05, which is $1 more than what the ball costs, you add those together, you get $1.10. Okay? All right, next question. How many of each animal did Moses take on the ark? Okay. If the answer is 2, say me. If the answer is 0, say me. Okay. See, this is the sad part I was talking about. Because everyone's scared they're going to say the wrong thing. The answer is 0. Because Noah took 2 on the ark. Moses didn't take any. Yes. All right. So how do you feel after that? Like, I could tell, even the second question, the responses got lower. But I bet no matter what side or what answer you had, you probably thought you were right. Okay? So that feeling of where you have know the knowledge, but the majority of the people gave the wrong answer, and the minority of the people gave the right answer. So just for a show of hands, you don't have to use your voice this time. Raise your hands if you got at least one of them wrong. Okay. Raise your hand if you got both of them right. Okay. So I count 2 people. Okay. So if my math is right, so 50% of the people got it right. No, I'm joking. There's a smaller amount of the people who got it right, and majority of the people who got it wrong. Now, this same thing plays out in work dynamics, because let's say you think differently. Let's say you're able to know things that other people don't know. This is kind of how I felt through going through work. I could see things way ahead. I could understand complex systems, and I would raise my hand and say, you know what? I don't think that'll work. Or I think this is a better way. But what do you think happened in those rooms? Yeah. It's more of a popularity contest rather than an actual intellectual discussion. If more people think the wrong answer is right, then that becomes the right answer. And what happens when weeks, days, months, years, whatever passes by, and then someone else says, hey, after this time period, we should be doing this. And this thing is the things that I said back there. This plays into the emotional distress that goes into being someone who's different. This is the emotional distress for being right, and whenever one thinks you're wrong, for being annoying because you keep bringing things up and won't let it go because you know it's right and you are fighting for it. And if you just made a better argument, if you just just made them see what you could see, then they would just understand that what they're doing is so wrong. And people love to be told they're wrong. And for that reason, these are some of the words that get associated for people who think differently. They're seen as lazy, they're seen as gifted and clever at times, but also annoying and disruptive. These labels are the labels that get put upon us, and it's not just the minority, it is the majority. So when you think about thinking different, when you think about diversity and inclusion, it's not just race, it's not just gender, there's also different ways of thinking. And in order to make those changes in your organization where you allow these voices to be heard, you have to make sure that there is a place that makes it safe for them to share these, because you're not just talking about that one discussion or that one argument, you're talking about a lifetime of these words being placed on you. So I mentioned words, let's talk about some actual words to help describe neurodiversity if you're not familiar with it. So the first word is neurotypical. And so there are a lot of prognosis or diagnosis, things that are medicalized in order to describe people who fall into different categories. Neurotypical is considered the standard. So if you call someone quote unquote normal, they are neurotypical. They are the things in which everyone else is judged for not being. So when someone asks, are you healthy? There's a perception of what that health is. When someone asks if you're quote unquote normal or if you're the standard, they're usually talking about neurotypical. Now, neurodivergent is the other. It's the othering of the people who do not fit that standard. So people who are neurodivergent can have ADHD, they can have dyslexia, but it also can be inherited. For instance, if someone is bipolar, they may not have been bipolar all their life, but they could become bipolar. Same thing with like a TBI, if you have a traumatic brain injury through a bad car accident or being in a war zone. There are different ways that you can fall into the category of neurodivergent, but those are kind of two sides of the same coin. You're either on one side or the other. Now, neurodiversity is a new concept that even if you've heard of it, you may not fully understand what that term means. But neurodiversity is an inclusive statement. If you need help wrapping your brain around this, think of it like biodiversity. It's not one thing, it's all of the things. And so neurodivergent and neurotypical are in neurodiversity. It's not just people who are neurodivergent, it is all of us. Neurodiversity is the theory that in order for us to survive, meaning us being humans, that it takes all of us. It takes all kinds of ways of thinking, it takes different ways of reasoning, and it takes different views of how you see the world. Without all of the components, we won't be able to innovate, we won't be able to advance, we will not be able to kind of move forward and evolve as a species. So neurodiversity isn't just saying like we need to find a way to get those neurodivergent people into our way of doing things. It's about understanding that it's a give and take and that both are needed and that it is going to be on all of us in order to make sure that there's room to make sure we're all being heard and that we're all welcome. Got it? Okay. All right, let's take a new perspective. Let's go back to that question at the beginning and those quizzes and understanding if you got it right, you got it wrong. It's easy to see when these words are used against us that we feel that it's a bad thing. It's bad to be different, just like me. When you feel it's bad to be different, then you are forced to conform. But if you're forced to conform, you're not able to realize that some of those differences in different aspects are actually superpowers or ways in which you can see the world in such a different place that could be used to an advantage. So let's make an example of how good things can be bad in some situations and bad things can be good in situations. So let's say I'm strikingly handsome. And then because of that, you can't pay attention to this presentation. I mean, a little close to home, but still. Let's do it the other way around. Let's say that in a situation, I'm extremely confident and I'm presenting to my group on a concept. Now, my confidence might allow me to tell you that my idea is good. It might show you that my perspective is the right way to go. But it also might be so overpowering that those who feel less confident can't speak up, that their voices are silenced because of me taking up more space than someone else who would make sure that voices are able to permeate some of that wall of security or confidence. So whatever you think of when you think of different traits of yourself or other people, realize that if there's things you admire, realize that there's another side of that coin. Not everything that is good is always good, and not everything that's bad is always bad. Not everything that is seen as good is good in every situation. Not everything that's seen as a negative is a negative in every situation. Let's look at some new perspectives, okay? So words. Let's say some people are called like a grammar Nazi or someone who is just very particular about an Oxford comma. There are people who understand the flow of language. They understand how the different words play against each other. You can take this thing where someone could be really ridiculed about how they see words and how things should be in certain order, but they could be the best wordsmith. They could be an awesome copywriter. They could be a lyricist. They could be a Taylor Swift. You don't know. Same with sounds. So soundscapes, like if you hear an annoying sound, or if there are certain frequencies that kind of like make you feel uncomfortable. Maybe you can detect when, I don't know, a motor's about to fail. What if you're able to figure out, how do I make people feel comfortable by creating a soundscape where they can feel hugged by the rhythms that are coming from the speakers? What if I'm able to visually see where chairs should be so we can make a good ingress and outgress? What if we were able to have relationships with objects so that you know that this fits with that? You could be an interior decorator. Things that people say that you might be too picky about or too specific about, or the way that they might pick you apart if they feel that, I don't know, you're really like locked in on something and I need to get you off of it. It's the same feeling where you know you have the right answer, but people are choosing not to listen to you. So let's build a space where people can be heard and that these gifts can be used for everyone's benefit. So let's talk about workplace adjustments. So how does this work functionally? Let's start by the hiring process, okay? So when you are thinking about putting out a job, you're thinking about presenting a job, think about how you're writing the job description. Are you writing it in an inclusive way? Are you sprinkling things that are nice to haves, but some people might interpret as minimum requirements? Think about the role that you want the person to play, and then really focus on what are the things that are required to do that role. I know that if you are ever in the job market these days, which I'm not right now, thankfully, but a lot of my friends are. If you're in tech, you've seen the layoffs. And there's a lot of jobs out there. There are like 3 jobs in a trench coat, where it's just like, okay, you want me to cook, clean, Windows, develop front-end, back-end, DevOps, and deploy and user research and presentations and analytics? Okay, that sounds like a good job. But think about paring that back if you can to just the basics so you don't have to find someone who has to fit the Cinderella criteria. And allow for specializations. If someone wants to do only spreadsheets all day, let them do all spreadsheets all day. If that's a function that you think is important, make sure that there's room for people to dive deep into the function that they want to actually spend time doing, okay? And then flexible hours. Not everyone needs to work 9 to 5 or come back to the office. Think about different ways of allowing people to be themselves because they may be socially awkward. Especially think about those words that people had to hear all their life the less they have to be in front of people, the less that they have to deal with some of that abuse or being triggered for something that happened to them in their youth or that's currently happening to them now. So think about these criterias when you're thinking about who you want to at least let into the front door to do interviews. And then when they're in the door, how do you make sure that they're comfortable? So think about accommodations, whether it's having an ergonomic desk is what we probably hear about when we think about accommodations. But accommodations can be as simple as after we have a meeting, email me some bullet points that you want me to follow up on so that it's clear. It can be if we're going to talk about a reading or a proposal, send it to me for at least an hour before the meeting so I can read it in a nice, calm environment before I have to discuss it. Accommodations don't have to be hard. They can be really easy. But if you don't open the floodgate of letting people express how things can be easier for them, then you may not ever know. But that puts it on them to say, hey, I need something different than everyone else. And you know what that feeds into? Not really positive emotion. So make sure you have accommodations, not just for the people you think need it, but for everyone. Because everyone could feel like work can be easier. And so let's make that available for everyone else. And also, are you concerned with how people do things, or are you concerned with getting things done? Sometimes if there's expectations that are set about how things should be done, whether or not they're done correctly, or if a target is met, or if a KPI is checked off, but is it that important that someone does work at midnight? And that's their ultimate time where they work best, as opposed to someone who does that same task at noon. Is it important that someone gets other coworkers to assist on some tasks, but they do the strategy and then everyone gets what they need? There are more ways to get to a solution than one. And if you are super strict on how people do things, then you are not really leaning into innovation. You're not allowing them to get you to the next level that their gifts might get you to. So please don't put people in a corner where they can only do the thing that you want them to do because they need direction or they need uh, some sort of control. So let people experiment and trust them to do their jobs. And then if you are going to retain people, you're going to retain this talent, then you need to be more objective than subjective. You can't say, well, I feel that they're not performing without looking at their number. I feel like they're not getting along with other people without asking other people how things are going. So remove these arbitrary rules and barriers and measurements and be really clear on expectations. And those aren't performance expectations because we're all participating in capitalism to make money, but we also want to make sure that we enjoy our work. And so maybe we'll skip a couple of steps before we answer an email. That works for me. That might not work for you, but that's not the important part. So if someone does something that's out of the mold and it works, reward that. Show them that it's worth something. Because the thinking of changing and evolving is something that we all have to live with, right? If we all stuck in our own silos and kept just plowing away without trying new things, how are we going to know that there's a better way? How are we going to know that there's an easier way? So allow for experimentation, and when someone does an experiment and it works, reward them. But also, if they experiment and it doesn't work, now you know another way that it can't be done, which is also extremely important. So be proportional with your rewards as well as proportionality with when things don't turn out the way that you think they will. Because let's say someone does something different and it fails and you punish them or you fire them, just like that first question, if you get it wrong, how many times are people going to stick their neck out to get it right the second time? Not much. And then when in doubt, just listen to your people, give them space to talk, give them a forum to give feedback, and then listen to when they say this is important to me, treat it as important to them. Just like the examples of sending an email after a meeting with bullet points. There's like, that's just so simple. I'll just do it when I need to. That's not listening to them. And that's not being compassionate. All right. We're going to do another feedback thing. Who knows the difference between compassion and empathy? Me? All right, cool. Okay. All right. Who's brave enough to say it? Okay, I'll take care of it. Do you want it? Yes. Okay, all right. I was giving your time to shine, but okay, if you want to pass it. So empathy is the equivalent of the golden rule, and compassion's the equivalent of the platinum rule. The golden rule is do unto others as you would like them to, as you want to be done upon. So if for some reason that you know someone likes a cold glass of water before they give a talk, maybe you'll go get a cold glass of water and give it to them saying, hey, this is for your talk. But compassion is doing unto those as they would like to be done upon. So if I'm a singer and I know cold water constricts my larynx and warm water loosens and makes it less prone to injuries, I would ask, like, what would you like, cold or warm? And then give me the opportunity to say, I would like a warm glass of water, please. And then that is what you do. And so there's more work on the latter than the former. You actually have to inquire what someone wants and what someone needs before you can actually give them the thing that they requested. So it takes more work to get out of your own body, your own centralized self, and explore out into really having conversations and discussions. Because it's easy to say, oh, a spider, I'm scared, everyone else must be scared. Or someone might say, oh, a spider, this is a healthy ecosystem. It'll eat some of the bugs that are flying around. You cannot pretend to know what someone else is going through, especially if you don't know the path that they walked. You can't put yourself in everyone else's shoes because we all take different journeys to get here. All right, that's the end of my presentation. I'm open for questions and clarity. Thank you all for giving me the time. Any questions? I answered everyone's questions. Perfect presentation. Yes. Winner. Oh,
Right.
there is one
Go
question.
ahead.
Hi, Tina Morris from AWS. So, as a people manager, it is sometimes difficult. People don't always know they're neurodivergent, right?
Yep.
And they don't know how to identify what they need.
Mhm.
So, you're kind of put in a position where you have to be a little intuitive and psychic to ask those right questions. Do you have any tips on how to bridge that gap when you start to identify? Because oftentimes what I find is you dig into this when you start to have a um, disciplinary problem isn't the right word, but like a productivity problem.
Mm.
And so you start to dig into what they really need and you can find their superpower there, but that's always starting from a negative place.
Yep.
That's not starting from when you bring somebody on the team kind of thing and proactively and building them up, which is the direction I'd rather go.
Yeah.
So
That's a really good situation. I think that you don't want to be put in the place where you have to diagnose people so that they can really have a mirror to themselves. They're like, I'm good. I don't need to look at myself. It's you who are all the problem. The issue is because of the labels, right? People don't like those labels. They don't like being told that they're wrong. And that's kind of how it feels to label someone. But if they come to it and understand where they might have difficulty, maybe that could help with them finding their own path. And I understand you can't necessarily do that for them, but if you can allow them to have that journey on their own. So if you say, for instance, are you having issues making deadlines? Are you having issues getting to the work that you feel isn't exciting you? Are you having issues with collaborating with your team? And then that allows them to say yes. And then if they say that actually is something that I do feel that I'm struggling with, then you can like probe a little deeper. Have you had this problem before? And then if they say yes, then it says, okay, well, I'm seeing a pattern here. what work have you done to try to kind of break this cycle? And if they say, I don't know where to start, then there's your in. That allows them to say, well, there's a couple things. There's a couple of steps, and maybe read a book or watch this podcast or watch this video. Uh, and see if this resonates with you, and see if you connect with that. And then let's keep this dialogue open. And I'm on your side. So instead of being on two ends of a table, just say like, let's just do this together. Let's work through this together. And as long as they have a partner, someone supportive to help them navigate this, then they'll be more inclined to say, okay, I read that book and I don't know if this works, or it does feel familiar, but it's just telling me what I am. It doesn't tell me what I should do, and I feel lost. Then once you have them ever into the place where they moved away from there's nothing wrong with me to now I have more questions, then that's the place that they will be there. Where you can have growth, where you can move out of this fixed mindset into this growth mindset. So then you don't actually have to be the person to answer these questions, but then you know that you can send them to places where they can get some of these answers on their own. Yes, next question.
Hey, Dinesh Babuta in personal capacity. I'll go a little bit further than what Tina had asked, and that is to do with the environment we're in this week. And it's a conference environment. And I run conferences, and with people I know personally, it's easy for me to incorporate them into the way they work and be mindful of that. But that's me personally knowing them. So if they're part of the crew and I know them, then that's what I can do. But running conferences is very fast paced. The logistics of it is very fast paced. Getting the PC, who are a different set of people, to talk to, who rate the talks and deal with the speakers, and then the logistics of the people here in the room. How would you suggest we build all that in? And the thing is, I'm already thinking about this thanks to your comments, but I'm just wondering, how can I make other people know other people personally?
That's a really good question. You're in the place where you don't know what you don't know, right? So you can make some assumptions, you can make some adjustments, but then there are things that you're going to inevitably miss out on, and things that you're going to make some missteps on as well. So when you're in these situations where it is something that's new for you as well, make sure that there is adequate and multiple ways of receiving feedback. Written, say, come talk to me during the conference, after the conference, anonymous, like cards that you can maybe drop in the comment box. As long as you provide a lot of ways that things could be better, it doesn't put you in a place where you have to have all the answers. What you need is make sure that there's enough spaces for the people who do, that those answers can come back to you, and you can iterate and make those changes. But it all kind of hinges on being clear and open on your intentions. What people try to do is maybe not express it, because once you express it, then people will hold you accountable for it. If you say that I want to make this an open and welcoming space, people will start to tell you the ways that it wasn't open, where people didn't feel welcome. And you have to be able to take those and not take them as a personal attack, but as a way that you can see and do better. And the thing with feedback, once you start letting it in, once you start validating it, you'll get more. So it'll never be perfect, but you'll always get how things weren't done correctly. And you have to have a good self-confidence to kind of power through that to accomplish your goals.
Okay, thanks. May I just ask one more?
Sure.
So in your experience as a speaker, having to have gone through the process of submitting a talk and everything, I'm just thinking, does that mean that we need to think about what goes into the abstract submission form? Should we be asking certain questions in terms of, actually, is there anything you'd like to tell us about how you work, or what's the best way for you to be on stage and things like that? So yeah. I don't know if Nanog asked you that, but I'm just thinking aloud here.
That'd be really great. This is what I was talking about, accommodations. You make accommodations for everyone. You don't necessarily need to identify people who need accommodations. I think that would be a great experience that not a lot of conferences do.
Okay.
And so that is a great differentiator as well, to like make sure that you hear the voices from people who would be nervous. But ultimately, this is my opinion, the difference between happiness and not happiness is how close your expectation is to reality. So if you are really trying to make people feel comfortable and you give all these clues and all these things to help people feel comfortable, their expectation is that they'll feel comfortable. And then if you're able to accomplish that, big check mark. So put it out there and then do the things that you need to do to feel that you're accomplishing that mission, and then take the feedback in order to keep iterating and making things better.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Doug Kameen, raise it up a little bit. Doug Kameen, I just two things. One, I would like to thank you for bringing attention to this type of stuff in the workplace. Like as a manager, this is one of those things that in the last several years I've really had to put a big focus on. And in the space when I try to do this with my teams, you highlighted about people being able to work at different periods of time of the day and the flexibility to do that and stuff like that. And I know I do that sometimes myself, and I try to make sure that that doesn't cascade into new things too. Like if I send an email as a manager, if I send an email at 10 o'clock at night,
right?
Have I now triggered somebody who's
Yeah.
like, I must respond to this email at 10 o'clock at night? And it's great that we have the tools to take care of those types of things too. Like I try to be cognizant of that, and I do that. And so I just wanted to say thanks and point out the importance of doing those types of things too in this space, and how those help try to make sure that you don't further create new issues as you go through the process of being accommodating to everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something I heard the other day, is like being elephant, not a hippo. Have really big ears and listen, as opposed to speaking and having really tiny ears. So as long as you're doing these things and you're vocal about expectations and like not replying to the email at 10 p.m., unless that's what they want, unless that's how they work, and that's totally fine, then that's going to be able to be helpful. So walking in the shoes is what I was saying before about setting expectations opens you up to criticism. And that is one of the things that I myself am working on often, to make sure that I keep asking questions, I keep hearing how I can be better, and then I treat every piece of feedback as a gift. And so as long as you can walk that walk, then you'll be all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Caitlin Pellick with Amazon Web Services. Yes, thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for giving this talk. I think it was really impactful to just kind of hear your perspectives. I did want to just share, I think personally for me, what helps is sharing my vulnerability first. I think if you have the capacity to do that, if you have the capacity to say, this is my experience, or this is what I'm going through,
Yeah.
I think that opens up the floor to other people to say, oh, okay, well, if they're comfortable sharing what's going on with them,
Mhm.
then I know that they're a more safe, for lack of a better word, person to talk to. And I'm not sure if that's the best approach, but that's kind of how I approach these things, and that's worked for me in the past. So.
Yeah, agreed. I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, who studies vulnerability.
Yes, yep.
And one thing she mentions about vulnerability is that you make sure that you're not being more vulnerable than the audience that you're giving it to that won't affect you negatively.
Yeah.
I know sometimes if you're sharing something hard, it does matter because you're opening yourself up. It does matter how you can perceive how it'll affect you if it's taken negatively.
Mhm.
Like if you say something like, I'm trying to think of something non-controversial because now I'm sure. Okay. But if you say something that what may hurt some people's feelings, it might be a polarizing issue, then you may not want to share it because it may be counterproductive.
Yes.
But you might think of something that's like, I like pineapple on pizza, for instance. That's something that is also controversial, but maybe not at the magnitude
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
like who you voted for last election or something like that. Um, yes. So yes, I totally agree. But just, what I say, everything in moderation, including moderation. So figure out the ways at which you can do that in a way that's safe for you and also is productive to what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you had me until you said you like pineapple on pizza. No,
It
actually,
was an example.
actually, I like it too.
Yeah.
However, I ordered the pizza half and half,
Right.
so that I make space for others.
I like people who like that. I am not one of those people.
Louis Lee, Google Fiber.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for this talk. And I'm wondering, in your experience with, if you've encountered like professional manager training companies, do they explicitly go into neurodiversity, and how well do they address that for training managers across the board, rather than just individual companies taking a culture and institutionalize that kind of safe psychological safety culture? I want to see it go wide.
Yeah.
Or have you not encountered?
I have encountered it.
Okay.
And I feel the same way that I do for some other DEI topics, is that it's seen as a class just like compliance training. And sometimes people retain it, and sometimes they don't, because they themselves may not be as close to the subject as other people. There's a study that said that if you look at DEI spaces or discussions of the spaces, the people who participate the most are the people who more identify than those that actually probably could use it more often. And I think a lot of these trainings don't put you or put people in the place of some of the struggle. And this lack of context makes it less structured, so that there's no scaffolding for this idea to graph onto. I think there's a little bit of work that needs to be done to really illustrate that not only is this important in general, but it's important to the person who's receiving it. And if the person who's receiving it doesn't feel like it's important to them, then most likely they will not retain it, nor will they do their own research and kind of move into the nuance and the differences. And that's very complicated. And then at the same time, for the companies that are bringing people in, it also might be a checkbox for them, saying like, well, we gave this training. But if they're not putting in some of the policies that I mentioned, if they're not putting in the mechanisms, if they're not really doing the things to keep themselves accountable, then it may not be effective. Because companies are made of people, people are flawed, people have biases, and people are always going to be that way unless there's a mechanism to try to keep them honest. And those mechanisms can make people uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, one last quick question.
T. Mark Jones, Internet Systems Corporation. So first off, I can totally relate to what you said earlier about being so handsome that people just don't listen to what you say. It is a curse.
I
But I'm
know,
working
we need
through
a
it.
support group.
We do. One of the things that you talked about, that we talked about many things, a great presentation. One of the things you mentioned was the current job market. And I've been doing a lot of research on that. And one of the primary things that employers are looking for is adaptability. So we want people who can come into our environment and adapt to the environment. And it seems like when we talk about adaptability, it's also, the onus is also on us as people, as coworkers in the workplace, not to just adapt to outside factors and outside environments, but to adapt to one another, to adapt to someone. I just met you today. I don't know anything about you just because we just met. So I have to adapt to who you are as a person in the same space and figure out how we make this thing work together. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on adaptability, and if you feel that that is appropriate to helping with neurodiversity.
Well, being able to adapt is not the same as conforming. So the question is, what set of roles are you having, or are you putting more weight onto? Is it the establishment, or is it this new thing, whatever that might be? And a lot of people see doing something new as risky, and they're actually really risk adverse. And so in order for this adaptability to be able to flourish or to be accepted, there needs to be kind of a loosening on what is considered the right way of doing things, but also a loosening on what kind of risks are allowed. And talking about what I was mentioning before is that the punishment for doing something that's perceived as wrong is one of the things that keeps people from taking these risks and preventing people from adapting. So you can't examine one without the other, because you can't want the upsides without really willing to take the low sides. So everything is perspective, and you have to make sure that you put the perspective in terms of kind of like a VC. They're saying, we'll make all these bets, all of them will fail except for one, and that next bet that hits is the one that's going to take us to the next level. And you have to have that same perspective when you're thinking about adapting your business model. All right, thank you. I'm over time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.